As wildfires ravaged Los Angeles, reducing entire neighborhoods to ashes and forcing thousands of families to flee their homes, opportunistic landlords saw the crisis as a golden ticket to inflate their profits. Some landlords seized the chaos as an opportunity to line their pockets. Rent hikes surged by as much as 124%, and hotel prices skyrocketed, doubling almost overnight. For families already reeling from the loss of their homes, this price gouging created an even darker nightmare. This isn't just a tragedy of homes lost to flames. It's a stark reminder of how the vulnerable can be exploited in times of crisis, with far-reaching impacts on low- and middle-income families struggling to survive. Over 28,000 structures were destroyed, displacing over 275,000 people. Amid this chaos, landlords illegally raised rents, in some cases by over 100%, violating California's anti-price gouging laws. A 5-bedroom property in Santa Monica that rented for $12,500 per month in February 2024 was suddenly relisted for $28,000, a staggering 124% increase. Smaller properties weren't spared either. In Woodland Hills, a modest 2-bedroom home saw its rent jump from $3,900 to $5,900 in mere weeks. California law prohibits landlords from increasing rents by more than 10% during a state of emergency. Governor Gavin Newsom declared such an emergency, and Attorney General Rob Bonta vowed to investigate violations. Yet, enforcement has been minimal, allowing greedy landlords to exploit desperate families. Real estate professionals like Samira Tapia and Jason Oppenheim have highlighted the blatant disregard for these laws. Tapia reviewed over 1,200 listings and found that nearly 30% had raised rents beyond legal limits. Oppenheim shared a shocking case where a landlord demanded $23,000 per month for a property initially listed at $13,000. This price gouging isn't just immoral, it's illegal. California's anti-gouging laws were designed to protect disaster survivors from exploitation, but landlords are brazenly ignoring them. Meanwhile, displaced families scramble to secure housing, offering to pay months of rent up front or exceeding their budgets just to secure shelter. One realtor described the scene as horrendous, with desperate renters throwing money into the wind while landlords rake in profits. The long-term consequences of these rent hikes are profound. The aftermath of the wildfires revealed the stark inequality within Los Angeles. For the wealthy, the disaster was a temporary inconvenience, a problem solvable with money and resources. For everyone else, it was a life-altering catastrophe. Middle-class and low-income families are forced to live on the streets, turning into an overnight homeless population. The city's existing homeless population, already one of the largest in the nation at 119,141 individuals in 2024, stands to swell significantly as wildfire survivors join the ranks of the unhoused. Experts predict the addition of at least 30,000 displaced residents, pushing the total beyond 150,000. Rebuilding homes lost to wildfires is a slow and expensive process. Affordable housing, already scarce, is often concentrated in fire-prone areas. For many families, reconstruction is a distant dream, delayed by high construction costs and bureaucratic hurdles. This leaves survivors with few options: overcrowded shelters, temporary accommodations, or homelessness.
I just miss my house and I want to go back.
The greed of landlords is only part of the problem. The government's inadequate response has left many feeling abandoned. Emergency funds are insufficient, enforcement of anti-gouging laws is lax, and rebuilding efforts are painfully slow. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass announced a reporting system for price gouging, but this measure feels like a drop in the bucket. Survivors need immediate action, not bureaucratic promises. Disasters should bring out the best in people, a sense of community, compassion, and shared humanity. Instead, in Los Angeles, they've exposed greed at its worst. The story of Los Angeles' wildfires isn't just about flames or ashes. It's about the resilience of its people and the systems that have failed them. The greed displayed by some landlords in the wake of the wildfires is a sobering reminder of how crises can amplify existing inequalities. It forces us to confront difficult questions about the morality of exploiting tragedy for profit. Is LA's housing crisis fueling crime? Everyone reports that looting and crime are on the rise in Los Angeles. But no one seems to be talking about the root cause, the desperation driving these criminals to act out. This growing trend of crime in the wake of the wildfires threatens to linger for years to come, as the social and economic fabric of the city is pushed to its breaking point. With communities devastated by disaster, the combination of housing instability and exploitive rent hikes is pushing people to desperation, and in some cases, crime. The link between the housing crisis and rising crime rates in Los Angeles is not a mere coincidence. After the deadly wildfires tore through the city, destroying homes, livelihoods, and professions, the city's housing crisis intensified. Yet, amid the ashes, some landlords saw an opportunity to capitalize on the suffering, raising rents to shocking levels. Despite state law prohibiting it, this practice continued unchecked, leaving many victims homeless or unable to find affordable housing. This kind of pressure often leads to crime, as desperate people see no other way to support themselves or their families. The greed of landlords during such a vulnerable time is one part of the equation, but the government's inadequate response has been the catalyst for much of the frustration and anger now boiling over in Los Angeles. As authorities failed to curb the illegal rent hikes, it seemed that the city had turned its back on its most vulnerable citizens. The result? A predictable surge in crime. Looting and theft became rampant as people, stripped of everything by the fires and now burdened with skyrocketing rent, turned to illegal means to survive. Over 3,900 looting reports were filed in just the first few days following the fires, overwhelming local law enforcement. This flood of crime is not merely a temporary blip, but a sign of a deeper problem. Los Angeles, already grappling with high crime rates, saw a 6% increase in overall crime in 2023, bringing the total number of reported incidents to 96,300. With a crime rate of 24.15 incidents per 1,000 residents, the city was already one of the most dangerous in the U.S., and the wildfires only worsened the situation. As homes burned and businesses shut down, the destruction left many with no means of support. In times of economic strain, crime often flourishes, and in Los Angeles, property crimes, already a significant issue, rose sharply. At a rate of 1,400 property crimes per 100,000 residents, Los Angeles is well above the national average. For many, the choice to commit crime isn't born out of malice, but rather necessity. With their homes destroyed and no jobs or means of support, looting and property crimes become a survival mechanism. The desperation is real. People who were already living paycheck to paycheck are now left with nothing. And while the city's leadership talks about crime prevention and recovery efforts, they have failed to address the root causes of these crimes: a lack of affordable housing, skyrocketing rent, and an insufficient safety net for those most affected by disaster. As the fires continue to ravage parts of the city and the homeless crisis grows, Los Angeles is facing an inevitable spiral. The shocking link: how wildfires ravaged Los Angeles' job market and fueled the homeless crisis. The effects of wildfires on employment are profound and long-lasting. While initial reports may not show the complete scope of the damage, early data paints a grim picture. In areas like Malibu and Pacific Palisades, the number of hours worked plummeted by 57% in the week that the fires began, according to Homebase, an operations platform for small businesses. This isn't just a temporary disruption. Wildfires dismantle local economies by displacing entire workforces. People who are forced to evacuate are unable to work, and jobs tied to the affected areas, landscaping, teaching, healthcare, are suddenly unavailable. Goldman Sachs analysts predict that wildfires will reduce January's labor market by 35,000 to 45,000 jobs, a significant blow to a region already struggling with inequality and economic instability. Wildfires directly lead to immediate homelessness by displacing families and consuming their homes. Those who lose everything often have nowhere to turn but already overburdened shelters, or, more commonly, their cars. This type of homelessness is uniquely devastating as it often catches people at the worst possible moment in their lives. Without jobs or homes to return to, they become part of the sprawling crisis that has overwhelmed Los Angeles in recent years. For the most vulnerable, children in particular, the trauma of losing their homes can be overwhelming. Nearly 21,000 children experience homelessness in Los Angeles each year, and the wildfire crisis is expected to push this number even higher. These children face not only the immediate displacement, but also disrupted education, emotional trauma, and limited access to basic resources. The long-term consequences are grim. Without stable housing, their futures are uncertain. For many, this means a perpetuation of generational poverty, as families who are barely hanging on become ensnared in a cycle of homelessness with few options for recovery. The economic ripple effects of the fires also disrupt the housing market, pushing those already vulnerable out of reach of affordable living. As demand for housing skyrockets in the aftermath of the fires, rents inevitably rise, pricing out low-income households. This is particularly tragic in a city where nearly 18.6% of the population lives below the poverty line, well above the state average. The increased demand, paired with a limited supply of affordable housing, creates a perfect storm of economic pressures that drive many more families into homelessness. The high property values in fire-affected areas make rebuilding a luxury few can afford, and for those without sufficient insurance coverage, the task of recovering from the devastation becomes a financial impossibility. The current wildfire crisis shines a glaring light on the fragility of Los Angeles's social and economic systems. The combination of environmental disaster, skyrocketing housing prices, and an insufficient safety net has created a perfect storm that is pushing thousands further into poverty and homelessness. Early estimates put the financial toll of the Palisades and Eaton fires at a staggering $260 billion to $350 billion, dwarfing previous records. For homeowners, this financial blow can be catastrophic, especially for those who lack proper insurance. The cost and time involved in rebuilding means many displaced families will remain in limbo, struggling to find stable housing in an already strained rental market. The wildfires in Los Angeles have proven to be more than just an environmental disaster. They are a catalyst for social and economic collapse. As the fires ravage the landscape, they leave behind more than scorched earth. They leave a growing population of homeless individuals struggling to find their footing in an increasingly unstable world. And as the crisis deepens, the question that remains is, how many more lives will be lost? Not just in the flames, but in the growing, systemic fire of inequality that these disasters fuel. This situation presents a dire need for intervention. Los Angeles stands at a critical juncture. The fires have revealed how deeply interconnected environmental and economic factors are, and how their intersection can create a vicious cycle of poverty and homelessness. The question is no longer whether the city will survive these disasters, but whether it will recover at all. Bold action is needed, not only to mitigate the effects of future wildfires, but also to address the root causes of homelessness. Without proactive solutions, Los Angeles risks an irreversible unraveling of its social fabric. In the face of growing inequality, destruction, and displacement, it is clear that the city cannot simply rely on the existing systems. It must find new, more inclusive ways to rebuild and recover.